that's really the idea of ground source heat pumps. So there you're not even looking for, very high enthalpy or anything. I mean, there are chances, like I said, chances where you're not really drilling. So you're just a couple of meters below the surface, but that is still geothermal energy in a way. And that can be extremely low enthalpy. You're not looking for anything very advanced there. Does all of that make sense, or am I making it extremely confusing with the heat pumps? Are heat pumps for heating a big thing in Italy or non-existent? I think they're not very popular. Have you seen any heat pumps for heating in Italy or in any other country you come from?
No. And now I understand the confusion. What I said doesn't have anything to do with it. I think it's a translation issue, because pompa di calore is heat pump, but it's a completely different thing.
It's a different thing, yeah? Okay. Anybody has seen a heat pump for heating in your areas, wherever you are? No? Okay. So,
Professor, can I ask something?
Of course.
I saw recently in Greece it became very popular. These fan coil, I think they're called.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Is it similar, or is it something completely different?
So there's a very strong similarity. So the fan coils, what do they do is, so the source of energy is exactly the same like with a heat pump. Actually, it is connected to a heat pump. The only difference is that you don't have what we call the split unit systems. With a split unit system, it's a very modular setup where pretty much, most rooms will have their own outside unit, and most rooms will have their own inside unit. Yes, so for every room you have inside and outside units with a split unit system. With fan coils, you normally end up having a large unit outside, which is then connected with a network of air ducts inside the property. So a network of air pipes property. And this network of air pipes is what we call the fan coils. This is what the fan coils are, that network of air pipes, which then blows hot air or cold air depending on the season. So that's the only difference. But there is a heat pump outside. Depending on where in the world you are or you visit, these systems are more or less prolific. But they will be becoming extremely prolific into the next decades. So that's why I'm feeling the need to tell you about them. So because you will be seeing them a lot. So we're looking to electrify heating. Electrifying heating will go through heat pumps. So we will see an enormous rise of heat pumps into the next few years. As in pretty much all of our heating systems will be running with heat pumps in about 20 years from now. There will be no house with a gas boiler or things like that. These things will belong in the past, in a matter of a couple of decades. So that's why I'm mentioning it, because you will see that as a very strong growth area into the next few years. The first time I saw a very extensive use of heat pumps was when I was living in the US, in Maryland, and there literally every house had one very large unit outside of the house, a heat pump, and it is not a small thing. It was something like maybe about 1 cubic meter, relatively speaking, but that kind of size. About 1 cubic meter of a device outside of the property, connected with ventilation pipes inside the house, and producing hot water, hot air, and cool air in summertime, if you wanted that. So, and it runs 100% on electricity. So that was the idea with that. And they're very efficient in terms of actual energy use. They use approximately 3 times less than a gas system would use. So significantly lower energy demand in that regard. Plus, it's electric energy, which if you could produce with renewables, it can be zero emissions. So there are ways to make all of the heating systems essentially zero emissions systems. So that's about heat pumps, and that's about how these heat pumps can be part of a geothermal energy solution. They work even better if you run them not through radiators, because one of the drawbacks, they work quite well with hot air, that's to say, if you want them to be used as a heating system, they work quite well with hot air. Hot air is not everybody's taste. So for example, myself, I really hate to have fans of hot air around the house. I don't like it at all. Plus, I feel it's quite dry. So it dries the air, and I don't like it at all. It dries my throat, dries my eyes. I don't like it very much. In terms of comfort, I don't think it's ideal. I prefer to have radiators, or ideally to have underfloor heating. And with that, if you were to think of it, how heat pumps work with either of these two systems, it's good to understand that heat pumps with radiators, they're not a perfect match. They can work well, but in a very cold place, if the house is not very well insulated, they would struggle. And the reason is that heat pumps cannot produce water which is extremely hot. So, your gas boiler produces hot water which can easily be 70, 80 degrees. So even a small radiator, because it is very hot, it can heat up a room quite easily. But your heat pump will probably be producing something like 45 degrees at most, which means that the radiators don't get very hot. So you either need very large radiators, which is possible, or a very well insulated house, or your house will not be very warm. The best use for these systems is typically underfloor heating, if you can have that. But of course, not every house has that built in. Most houses don't have it. So yeah, that's another consideration. If it's a new built house and you want a heat pump, obviously it's going to be underfloor heating. So yeah, that's a little bit about heating systems and about how these blend with geothermal energy and how they blend with heat pumps. Any questions so far? Because I've told you a lot of stuff on these areas. Do you have any queries so far? So I'm writing there, low enthalpy geothermal energy for heat pumps. So now you have a little bit of a better view what heat pumps are. I could even try to, let me see if I can do this quickly. So, yeah, actually that's quite easy. What I can do, maybe, is I can show you a couple of examples. Maybe I can share my screen a little bit. I just want to make sure that you all have a feel of what these things are. You cannot attend my module and not know about these things. So I would feel very bad. So give me a sec to do this correctly. Tap 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 tap. Am I sharing my screen now? What did I do?
No.
No? Okay. Now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I'm not doing anything crazy here. I just went out and Googled heat pump split unit systems, yeah? And I can show you, for example, something like this one. Oops. Let me click on this. Oh, it doesn't like it. Where is it? Oh. Okay. Let's go shopping. So you have things like this one. Visit site, that's what I want to do. So what this is the outside unit that you keep outside of the house. And then every room has its own internal room unit. Yeah. I think you might have seen something like that, right? I mean, particularly for cooling, probably you've seen those.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So the same system, it might be a different quality external unit, but it's really the same system in a way, can be used for heating. Like if you see this one, yeah, cooling capacity, 13 kilowatts, heating capacity, 13 kilowatts. So it has a lot of heating capacity as well. It can be used for both. And of course, it comes with all the kind of, weird sci-fi stuff. You can put it on Wi-Fi and do anything else you like. So yeah, this is a very typical design of a heat pump. And then the others, something your colleague mentioned, fan coils and whatever else, like ducted systems and so on. But that's the typical thing you're looking for. So that's what I very quickly wanted to show you, so you have an idea of what am I talking about. Now, I think the next thing we should be talking about today is energy storage. And energy storage is a very big picture. It includes lots of things, lots of technologies, lots of applications. And one of them is via hydrogen. And lots of these applications spill over to other sectors and so on. So it's quite exciting to think of that. So about energy storage then. So the main things we have for energy storage would be things like, let me show you. So for energy storage, you're looking for things like batteries. I'm sure you're all very familiar with batteries. So batteries are what we call electrochemical storage, because they use electrochemistry to essentially store electricity. That's the idea. But beyond batteries, we also have things like hydrogen, and we'll explain soon exactly how we can use hydrogen as an energy storage technology. And we have also things like pumped hydro, which we definitely have mentioned before when we're talking about hydropower. So what we're saying then is, with normal hydro, you have water going down and it goes through a turbine and produces electricity, and that's it. Then the water goes away, continues downstream in a river and then ends up in the sea somewhere. So that's one way. The other way is if you could have two reservoirs, one lower, one higher, and we use water, as the water flows down, we run it through a turbine. So that turbine allows for the water to produce electricity. But then if we have excess energy within our system, then we can use that excess energy to pump that water that went down, pump it all the way up. So we drive that water again up, and we use it to essentially store energy. So whenever we need energy later on, we can let it flow downwards again and produce electricity again. So that's the other system. So pumped hydro is then the third system. It's not the only, these systems I'm showing you here, batteries, hydrogen, and pumped hydro are not the only systems. Yeah, the idea that I'm talking about here of pumped hydro, so taking something to a higher elevation and then allowing it to go down, that's a very simple idea, which we can apply with other things. It doesn't have to be water. Yeah, it can be stones. It can be very heavy weights. It can be a rail track that we're just pulling up and then letting it go down and produce energy with that. So there are various ways in which you can do that. Not all of them have been tested at scale. There are ways to do these things. There's also something more, which is pressurizing certain gases. So for example, you can pressurize air at an extremely high temperature, extremely high pressure, sorry. So you can use excess energy to pressurize air at extremely high pressure. And then when you need energy, you use that super pressurized air to drive a turbine, for example. That's another way to store energy. Now, with every one of these systems, we care about specific characteristics. So what are these characteristics? Can you give me some examples of characteristics we might care to know when we evaluate energy storage systems? What kind of things we want to know about them? When we want to evaluate them? Let's have some of your thoughts on that.
I don't know if we can say the efficiency.
Efficiency. What do you mean with efficiency? Tell me more.
Yeah, so how many energy I put in and then how many energy I can release after I store it for a while.
Correct. So this is what we call, and I write it here, is the cycling efficiency. Yeah. So that's essentially, say, imagine I put in 100 units of energy initially. How much of that energy will I get out of it when I actually need it? It's a good question. Chances are it won't be 100%. That would be amazing if it was 100%. But with every conversion of energy that you do, you will lose a little bit of energy. That is the truth. And some systems are better than others. So, for example, batteries tend to be relatively good at that. So with batteries, you might get something. I mean, it depends again, because batteries are, several dozens of different technologies. It's not just one technology for batteries. But let's say lithium-ion batteries tend to be approximately 90% efficient for these processes. So they're quite good. Pumped hydro, unfortunately, isn't as good, but it's still around 80%. You can get 75% from pumped hydro. So if you give about 100 units of energy to push water up a reservoir and then let it come down, in total, the electricity you will get from the way down is going to be around 75 to 80 units. Yeah. So you've lost the rest in the process. And then you have things like hydrogen, at which you're lucky if you manage to get even 70, 60% thereabouts. Yeah, so you have varying degrees of energy losses in this system. So cycling efficiency, very important one. How much energy will I get out of the system I use to store the energy in? Anything else other than cycling efficiency?
Maybe how this efficiency deteriorates with time, like with batteries, for instance. So like it's not going to stay 90% forever.
Correct. So that is the system degradation, let's say. Yeah. So with this one, system degradation. So with this one, as your colleague very well said, batteries might sound great that they have 90% cycling efficiency, that if I keep using that battery after 10,000 cycles, forget it. It will be dead. Especially if it's a lithium-ion battery, probably it won't even make it to 10,000 cycles. It will be dead completely by that point. But already from 1,000 cycles, I should be seeing significant drops in this cycling efficiency, because my cathode is already contaminated with lithium ions, and there's no way, this is an irreversible process, really. You need a new battery at that point. So batteries would be quite bad at that. Hydrogen could be quite good at that. It doesn't degrade significantly. Depending on the technology you use, but chances are you will need to maintain your systems, but you could keep them alive for much longer. Pumped hydro, again, you know, alive forever probably. And we'll have power stations that have been running for 20, 30 years like that, and they're okay. Just need to clean them from debris from every now and then, but there's no real degradation. So that's a super important one, especially because, as we said, batteries are starting quite high. So that sounds good, but the longevity, well, might not be that good, particularly for batteries that, are in the market already and we have seen a lot of use of, yeah? Again, it takes conversation over, what technology is moving. And I can tell you that new battery chemistries, which are just now coming into the market, appear to be superbly better than that. So we start seeing way better longevity than we have seen in the past. But let's be realistic over what is now in the market. They're not necessarily batteries that can last forever. So that's that. What else? Is there anything else that we could be thinking of? What other criteria do we need to evaluate our energy storage systems?
Costs. How much does one cost and how much the other one costs?
Correct, cost. Like everything, you wouldn't evaluate anything at all without knowing about costs. So costs, very much. And there you might need a cost per unit of energy stored. So it might be more like this, cost per, let's say, kilowatt hour. Yeah, so that's per unit of energy that you can store in your system. You might also care about things like, say, for example, energy to, or rather, correctly, power to energy ratio. Yeah. So let me say a little bit here. So let me start from the cost per energy, per kilowatt hours. Now, that is, again, if I were to talk a little bit about energy storage systems that we were discussing here, typically looking about batteries, I mean, let's say some of the better batteries out there, lithium ion or lithium iron, so not ion, lithium iron. These can be also very reliable batteries in a way. But when you look at the costs, the ones which appear to be relatively more promising in cost reduction, you could be paying probably about, what would that be? About 120, 140 USD on for every kilowatt hour, something around that, like that. And then you, depending on the size and the scale that you have for hydrogen systems, these could end up being actually cheaper. There are lots of parameters there, because it's a lot of questioning about how much you can charge and how fast and all of these things, but it's a whole other game there. But it's important for us to think that costs for batteries are quite high, that generally, a significant cost that that could mean that you wouldn't scale up. Yeah, so battery costs still now, even though they have come down quite dramatically over the last 5-6 years, they remain quite high. So very large scale applications for batteries, they're a little bit of they require the right market incentives to become profitable and become market participants quite easily. So it's not, I mean, if you were to use, for example, let's say energy storage for a whole country, right? And you want to run the whole country in wintertime with energy storage, say for a few weeks, where you might not have a lot of wind energy, or you might not have a lot of solar energy, but you still don't want to freeze the country. You still need to run the economy. You still need to warm up the houses and all of that. So if you wanted to run a country like that, I cannot see how batteries will do that. Yeah, it's so difficult to imagine, the terawatt hours of batteries that you will need there, and the costs that will come with this. It will be very difficult to justify the expenditure and the production of that level of batteries. You can do a lot with batteries, probably, if you're looking for daily cycling, so charging at times of the day that there is enough supply, and discharging at times of the day where there is more demand than supply. That you can probably do. But what we call seasonal energy storage, so being able to run your system for a few weeks per time, this is going to be really difficult for batteries. I don't think batteries will do that. And as we're transitioning towards 100% electrified systems and 100% renewable energy systems, we actually need solutions that can run country level electricity with energy storage if there's a need. It might not be needed every year. It might be needed once every 5 years. But if everything relies on electricity, imagine a futuristic scenario in 20 years from now, where your electricity, of course, it's electric, and your heating is electric, and your car runs on electricity, and then suddenly there is a power cut for a week. What are you going to do? I mean, that's a house that is frozen, food that is rotten, or you can take it outside in the garden and heat it up and cool it down, and you cannot go anywhere. Not only with your own car, you cannot go anywhere with a bus, because the bus will not run, because the bus will be electric as well. So there is, all the infrastructure will be completely destroyed. So this is why you hear me saying here that, if we're going to be electrifying 100%, if we'll be going towards 100% renewable energy, grid level storage and seasonal level storage will be required. And batteries, I don't think they're going to do that. So for certain countries, pumped hydro could be a solution. I can easily imagine that for countries that have high mountains with a lot of water resources. Say, for example, I mentioned before Austria, I've mentioned before Switzerland, countries like Norway are ideally placed to do that. They could sustain energy supply for several weeks at a go just by stored energy. It is doable. Even if they don't have at the moment the right infrastructure to do that, it's quite easy, quite straightforward to actually, invest and do that. But flat countries, say like the UK is to some extent, or Denmark, or the Netherlands, or Belgium, that's impossible. They have no chance with pumped hydro. There's no way to do that. So what is left? Other than imports and exports, which of course we will see a huge increase in, we will need to start using hydrogen. So that's where hydrogen kicks in. And hydrogen is a lot more scalable. Yeah, hydrogen can actually do that. You could have vessels that you can store hydrogen for long term, and you can use it. You can be storing hydrogen, imagine, throughout the summer, pretty much. Slow storage systems. So whenever there's excess energy, keep producing some hydrogen, pumping it inside your storage systems, and then wait for that time in winter when you can actually use it, where you can actually need to use it, when there is very high demand for heating or other things. So that's, where hydrogen could become an interesting part of the storage game. Now, I did write before here, power to energy ratio, and that's a tricky one. And maybe, let's see if I'll manage to make it clear. So certain types of energy are better suited than others to provide fast energy, so rapid energy injections into the system. Hydrogen is pretty bad at that. Now, to help you understand that, imagine that, do you know that there do exist hydrogen cars? Have you heard of that? Maybe? There aren't that many. It's just 3 or 4 models altogether, and they have sold nothing.
Yeah, some news sometimes comes out.
Yeah. So it's a very niche kind of product. They're not popular because there is very little refueling infrastructure, and if I'm to be honest, they're very rubbish cars in many ways. So electric vehicles, I don't think we're going to see them very much. With hydrogen, I think we're seeing them already pretty well with direct battery electric systems. Imagine even those cars that are hydrogen, they actually have a battery on board, and the battery is what drives the motors, and then the hydrogen just recharges the battery, because the hydrogen is so slow in producing energy that actually, it's not really possible to run anything that needs immediate response like it is with a car. You need to press the accelerator and the car needs to go. You cannot be waiting for 15 minutes to do that. So
what about the mix? We have the problem with batteries about the autonomy they have. What about the mix of the two?
So you will be using, hydrogen vehicles essentially are battery and fuel cell vehicles. So they have both hydrogen and battery. They have a small battery, which they charge continuously through the fuel cell, which runs with hydrogen.
Doesn't seem so bad.
Well, it's pretty rubbish because it's too complicated. So it's not. I mean, there are many reasons why it's rubbish. A, it's super complicated, and B, and very important, there is no hydrogen infrastructure. So there's nowhere to charge these things, and hydrogen infrastructure is very expensive. So if you want it for, refueling cars, forget about it. I mean, it's good for centralized things, but for having a distributed system where you can charge everyone's car, that's almost insane. The other thing, of course, is that hydrogen is ridiculously inefficient in terms of its cycling processes. Yeah. So wherever batteries can go, which is electric cars, for example, you wouldn't use hydrogen. It's stupendous to use hydrogen there. It would be too expensive. It would be too inflexible and too fault prone. So there is really no benefit for hydrogen in private vehicles. So batteries are very good, for example, in this power to energy ratio. So it means that they can inject power in any system very fast. So they can go to 100% of their capacity imminently in milliseconds. So that makes them extremely good at fast response energy requirements, which is what you would need, for example, in a vehicle. That's why electric cars really, go mad, yeah? And they accelerate so fast. You see family sedans, accelerating faster than any supercar in the world. So that is the benefit of batteries. Also, in an electrical grid, if you just want, the few seconds of energy that they're there just to balance the grid at any given moment, batteries are again amazing. But if you want them to run for a couple of weeks, then forget it. It's not going to work. So that's the power to energy ratio debate a little bit. What other things do you imagine you would ask if you were to evaluate energy systems other than what we have there? Are we happy with what we have, or do we need more?
Sorry, clarify the question.
So we have already put down here a few criteria with which we can evaluate energy storage systems. I've said cycling efficiency, system degradation, cost per kilowatt hour, and power energy ratio. What else could you put there?
Refill.
Say more?
Refill of energy. I mean, in the battery is very slow.
Correct. So refueling infrastructure.
Refueling, yes, refueling.
Correct. So with that, to decarbonize. And it's one of the hardest to decarbonize because you need a lot of energy density. This is what fossil fuels do extremely well. Yeah. So 1 kilogram of petrol has about 100 times, almost 100 times, more energy density than a battery. Yeah. So you store in a kilogram of petrol almost 100 times more energy than you can store in a battery that is 1 kilogram. So it's an insane differential there. Yeah. So imagine if it's a car, you can probably do something about it. You can sort things out because it's on the land. The weight of the vehicle is important, but it's less important than it is for an airplane. The airplane needs to take off and stay in the skies all the time, and it needs to spend a lot of energy to remain airborne all this time. So energy density for these batteries is extremely important. And we start seeing now interesting examples, particularly for relatively smaller aircrafts that can go shorter distances. So if you imagine that there are lots of flights right now around the world, flying pretty much, in shorter distances. Yeah, so not flying from, I don't know, London to New York, but flying from, I don't know, say London to Manchester. So it's a flight which will be half an hour or 20 minutes. Or from Norwich, where I am, to Amsterdam, which would be, again, 20, 30 minutes flight. Or from Bologna, flying to Milan. Yeah, so very small distances like that. Right now, we start seeing the first examples of commercial airplanes being electric and starting, the very shy steps of entering the market. These aren't large fleets yet, so let me be clear. Yeah, you're not going to be flying on an electric airplane very soon. But we start seeing the first examples of possible applications there. These are airplanes which can be, 20, 30 seats maximum, and that can fly distances of about 300-400 kilometers, something like that. So these types of applications, I think by 2025, we'll start seeing some examples which are directly, applicable in commercial settings. Afterwards, when batteries start getting a little bit better, we might start seeing, even better applications. But that is where, for example, we could start seeing also hydrogen. Some of the larger, flight companies are already experimenting with hydrogen engines. So we will see where that goes. It could be either hydrogen with fuel cells, or hydrogen directly, as a combustible material.
Can
yes?
I ask you,
Sure.
What about the cost?
You mean the cost of these flights?
Yes, for example.
Yeah, well, I mean...
What do you think? Because of course, there is no market.
I'll tell you what I'm seeing there. So, okay, so let me explain this in a different way. So the main way in which, say, European flights or even intra-American flights tend to be very cheap is by putting a lot of people inside an aircraft. So they will try to squeeze, 150 people in an aircraft. And that's how you can make it quite cheap. Now, that is one way. As I said before, the aircrafts we now see first coming out of experimental lines and hopefully into production lines soon are ones which are smaller. So there will be ones which can normally take 20 to 30 passengers. You might be wondering, okay, why? I mean, that's because, of course, you cannot have the right energy density that would allow you to fly a very heavy aircraft. That is the main reason. Are there flights around the world which could be done with these small aircrafts in a profitable way? Yes, there are. Lots of them, but they're not in highly population density areas. So, for example, let me give you a couple of examples here. There are flights going daily from, say, Scotland airports, from Inverness in Scotland. That is relatively north in Scotland. The northest city of Scotland is Inverness, and they go to the Outer Hebrides, the islands which are at the northwest of Scotland. These islands are tiny, first of all, and not very highly populated. But you need flights to go there. You need flights, or you need, boats to go there. And of course, you need both, because sometimes, one or the two cannot do it. So ideally, you need both. But such flights, you don't need there, a 200 passengers aircraft to go there, because you don't have 200 passengers. You normally would be flying there anyways, 20 to 30 people with these aircrafts. Or in places like, for example, all over Alaska, the state of Alaska, all of the regional airports around Alaska are connected. I mean, you connect most of the cities around Alaska, cities or little towns anyway. They're not huge cities or anything. You connect them with flights. The reason is that there's virtually no good quality road network, and at certain seasons that network is completely frozen. So it's not particularly easy to do anything else than just fly around. And again, do you fly lots of people? Do you fly hundreds of people from village to village? No, you just need to fly 20 or 30 people maximum, even less at times. So there are such applications which, they're more niche applications. But the more we manage to get these applications right, that will be how we start. We did start in the same way, with electric cars. Some years ago, they were very niche. You would have only, the Tesla Roadster, for example, which was a very niche vehicle, not a car for everyone. Gradually, we're moving down the scales, 10 years later, we're moving down the scale with way cheaper electric cars, which I'm not saying, that they're for everyone. They're still relatively expensive, but they're way more affordable. I mean, we see millions and millions of electric cars being sold every year right now. That wasn't the case 5, 6, 7 years ago. So as we develop a technology, put it first into the niche markets, see it develop there, see it being used, see it's being scaled up, that is how we learn how to do it, cheaper, better, more efficient. So gradually would allow us to go into higher level applications, which will be, larger aircrafts, which will be cheaper. That was where I was ending to. So where, for example, the flights I'm talking about, which are more niche, these aren't cheap flights. You wouldn't get a ticket there for a tenner with Ryanair. You would be paying, a normal price of a couple of £100 or euros or whatever. So these flights can be affordable with electric systems within the next 3-4 years already. So that was the kind of density question when it comes to that. So I wanted to give you that little introduction before I go and talk more specifically about hydrogen, and I will do that after the break. So let's take a little break and let's come back at what time? At 5 o'clock your time, shall we? Yep, so I'll see you in 20 minutes. Hello. So we're back. Sorry for the little delay in starting up. It's because I didn't really leave before. I had to find a way to add as many of you as possible within this group. So it's the last class, so it's better I do it now, rather now than never. So I think I've added everyone, apart from a couple of you, Jonathan and Lorpu, for whom I'm getting the message that you guys are already in the group. So if despite all that you still cannot access anything, then I'm wondering what could be possibly wrong here. Because I can actually see you in the team. Are you sure you're logged in with your normal university credentials? Could it be that you're logged in with something else, with different accounts?
I'm here already, Professor.
Does it work now for you, Lorpu?
Yes, it's working.
Okay, good. And Jonathan, is it the same for you? Yeah?
Yeah, for me somehow it's not working. When I click on the link, there's something like download Teams, but I've already downloaded it, so.
Okay. And are you logged in with your normal UNIBO credentials or something else?
Yes, with the UNIBO.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I'm wondering what could be wrong then, okay.
If I may say something, I had the same issue with my, because I usually use Firefox, and then I did it with Chrome, and then it worked. So I don't know which.
So you use a different browser, you said?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and I will try it with another browser, and if it's not working, I will just send you an email.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I'm saying all of that because it's very difficult, unless you have access there, it's very difficult for me to send you, for example, the recordings. Yeah, because they're very large files, I cannot email them. So it would be good if we can find a way to get this done. For those of you that want the recording, the slides might be a bit easier, but the recordings, I don't have any other way to share them with you. So
I have one question.
Sure.
Is it possible to share the documents on Virtuale?
You see, I wish I knew the answer to that. Maybe there is a way, maybe not. I mean, I have to admit, I have never used Virtuale. This is my main concern here. That I don't know how it works and how much, and how actually usable it is for large files and things like that. If that's our last resort, we might find a way to do it. We'll figure it out.
If you go in the Virtuale of any feature, you can find all the slides, and on one side of the page you have all the recording of Panopto, and they are all uploaded. So
okay,
you can upload anything.
I don't doubt it's doable. I doubt my ability to engage with it.
Right. I don't know how it works for teachers, because we have a different, when we open it, we have a different.
Yeah, no, it's true. Okay, so the only thing I meant to say is if you have colleagues who still cannot access the files, and because we're not going to have any other class, do tell them to drop me a line, an email. I'll do my best to see, like I've added now, I don't know, about 10 of you. I think that looks relatively easy. I can do that. I didn't realize before how to do it, but just now I was looking online for a way and I found it. So I thought it's a good idea to try it out. So do let them know that I'd be happy to try to do it for them as well. So if they send me an email, I will try to do it for them as well. So that's that. I did promise you before that I'd be talking to you a little bit more about hydrogen, because we did cover a little bit of ground with the more generic aspects of energy storage and what one needs to look at to understand, if one storage technology is good enough or if another is better, and all of that. There are two links that I want to share with you when it comes to energy storage. 2 or 3 links even. Let me try to see the possible formats I can do this in the best possible way. So Michael Librai, and hydrogen. So there are a couple of ways to show you this. Part 2. Okay, good. So what I'll do then, I'll share a few resources, but they're essentially parts of the same thing. Yeah? So here is one. So this is an article that you can read. Here is the second part of the same article, and I'll share with you the audio blog versions of the same material. So depending on what you prefer, if you prefer to listen to it or if you prefer to read it, you have all the options available. So what this is, let me tell you now that I've shared all the links with you. So what this is really Michael Librai, sorry, who is kind of I've told you before about him, and I've showed you his YouTube channel. He's one of the best qualified people to understand market trends in energy. He's one of the most prolific energy gurus out there, and he has really dedicated quite a good amount of resources in discussing hydrogen. So there are 2 articles of his here. One is the supply side and the other is the demand side for hydrogen. And he's doing a good job in positioning hydrogen where it should be. Now, what I've realized earlier was that I was talking about hydrogen without really making I've made an introduction to energy systems, but I was talking about hydrogen without having introduced hydrogen in any viable way. So I'll do it now very, very briefly. And I think this is important for some of you to have a feel of it, because a lot of stuff is going to be happening around hydrogen in the next few years. It will carry on happening, not just in the next 5 or 6 years, but in the next probably couple of decades. I think we'll be seeing a lot of hydrogen, not only conversations, but also infrastructure, and it will be one of the growth areas in Europe as we decarbonize. So there's a lot of hype, and there's a lot of actual useful stuff. So I want us to be in a place to understand what is hype and what isn't. And these articles that I've shared with you will be doing a great job in doing that. But let me introduce a couple of concepts here with hydrogen, because these articles assume a level of knowledge already that you might not have. So first things first, what is hydrogen? It's essentially a gas. Let me see, because I've stopped the recording before. No, I haven't stopped it. It's still going. Okay. So hydrogen is a gas. It's very light. It's one of the lightest gases next to helium, and it has very certain attributes. So the main one of which is that hydrogen is not readily available. So it's not like we can go and drill somewhere and get some hydrogen out. It's mostly that we have to produce hydrogen. And as a result, we're entering in a process of we have to think of, okay, right, how do we produce hydrogen then? And there are a few ways to produce it. So let's think a little bit about that. One is through renewable energy sources. What does that mean? That means that we need electricity. And mind you, can produce electricity with anything. Yeah? You can be producing electricity with whatever you like, with coal, nuclear, gas, or renewables. What matters is that then you will take that electricity and you will run it through a process that is called electrolyzing. So electrolyzation. So you will do the electrolyzation, and with that you essentially electrolyze water. So you electrolyze water, and that tends to break water into its 2 elements, which are hydrogen and oxygen. So that's a, let's say, a way to process, to produce hydrogen. So, and that is what we call the green hydrogen. Yes, so I'm going to write it here for you. So green hydrogen is hydrogen produced by renewable energy sources through electrolyzation. Okay, so that's roughly the green hydrogen view. We call it green because obviously we link it to renewable energy sources. So we produce the hydrogen through electrolyzation that has been using electricity that was renewable electricity. So that's one thing. Now, there's something else called blue hydrogen. Now, blue hydrogen is, again, hydrogen. It's very much the same hydrogen like the other one. The difference is in how we've produced it. So blue hydrogen is normally produced through a chemical process via the use of natural gas. So let me write this for you. Blue hydrogen is hydrogen produced by natural gas, where, to call it blue hydrogen, you then inject the carbon dioxide, which is the byproduct of this process, to CCS. CCS is carbon capture and storage. So this is blue hydrogen. It's hydrogen produced by natural gas, but because there's a byproduct there, which is carbon dioxide, you need to take the carbon dioxide and put it into CCS. So you need to get rid of it. You cannot emit it. Yeah. Now, if you don't have CCS, because let's be honest, there isn't that much carbon capture and storage going on around. It's very experimental and very niche. So if you don't have CCS, but yet you still produce hydrogen from natural gas, then you call this gray hydrogen. So that's gray hydrogen, which is essentially hydrogen. So it's what I'm going to say here, blue hydrogen without CCS. So carbon dioxide is being emitted. So it's not being captured and stored. Yeah. So you have at least these three types of hydrogen production. You might hear of others, but I don't want to get too crazy with that. There are other types there, but these three are the dominant ones you're going to be hearing about. Now, if I were to ask you, do we produce hydrogen these days? I mean, does anybody produce hydrogen today? Is this something we use or not really?
Yes, but I think in mainly small projects. I heard about a solar park in Germany, and they use they have on one day, if they have like a lot of energy, they store it in hydrogen and then use it later when there's not that much sun.
Correct. So there is a little bit of hydrogen being produced in energy-related uses, like the one that Jonathan has just mentioned. But this is very niche. Yeah, this is extremely niche, and it makes no sense financially. It is just being done for experimental reasons. It's kind of a vanity research project. So that's one thing. But we do use some hydrogen. We produce some hydrogen predominantly for chemical uses, so for non-energy users. So, for example, the circles in which we produce some of the fertilizers include, because they include ammonia. So to produce ammonia, we need to be getting nitrogen with hydrogen combined. So that means we need hydrogen for that. And how do you produce that hydrogen? We take natural gas and we go for what you see here as gray hydrogen. That is how we produce most of the fertilizers out there. There is also a chance that we need hydrogen for other chemical processes. And again, that is mostly produced with what we call gray hydrogen. So that is just to give you a little bit of a sense that, when it comes to chemical processes, which are right now used, so nothing very scientific fiction of, energy uses, massive energy uses for hydrogen, but rather things that have been going on for the last, decade or two, all of that has been gray hydrogen. So the vast majority of hydrogen produced right now around the world is gray hydrogen. And of course, the fossil fuel industry, particularly the gas industry, is very excited to talk about blue hydrogen, which will be hydrogen produced, with natural gas, but with CCS. So to promote the green credentials of hydrogen in that area, because you have CCS. As you can imagine, natural gas industry has a very strong vested interest in all of that, because clearly they want to see their natural gas keep, stay in the game, really, because if natural gas is going to be the fuel of choice for producing hydrogen, then that means that these guys stay in the loop, stay in the market. Whereas otherwise, let's face it, no fossil fuel company will be in the market in 30 years unless they change what they do. Many of them will go bankrupt much faster than that. So that's why you can see them being very strong proponents of blue hydrogen. Now, I would say here, don't believe a lot of that. Yes, so blue hydrogen is a fictional product. There is a tiny amount of that. There is not a huge capability to produce a lot of it, because there are various problems with scaling up, with producing at scale carbon capture and storage. This is not an easy thing to do. So capturing carbon and storing it is not a particularly easily scalable technology, which means that whatever blue hydrogen you're hearing about, probably it's going to end up being gray hydrogen, as it is at the moment. Yeah. So I'm extremely skeptical about anything else than green hydrogen. Now, let's go to green hydrogen per se. At the moment, exactly because of what I've told you earlier, that hydrogen efficiencies cycle, so the energy you need to put into hydrogen and the energy you get out of it when you want to use it for energy afterwards, the efficiency of that cycle is not particularly good with hydrogen. So it means you need to be using a lot of renewables to produce hydrogen, and then to use a little bit of it eventually as energy at the end. So there's an issue here, that is that we need a lot of renewables to be able to produce a lot of hydrogen to allow us to use it as a storage means. That makes it even more difficult, because right now we don't have that many spare renewables. Of course, we're growing renewables vastly, in some countries faster than others. And as we do that, and as renewables grow and grow and keep growing, there's a good chance that gradually we will be reaching that point where we have enough spare renewables that cannot be used in any other way. And so these renewables can easily be going for hydrogen production. So we're not there yet in most countries, but we're gradually will be getting towards there. So we'll gradually be having enough capacity to allow us to run electrolyzers. So that's where I see hydrogen going to. Green hydrogen only, and hopefully, with a more abundant supply of renewables, we should be able to scale that up as we go. I think it will happen, but are we there yet? I don't think we are. So that's that side. Now, I'm not completely sure if all of you are clear about what hydrogen does. So I say hydrogen is a means to store energy. I'm not sure if that is totally clear to all of you. So let me go through this a little bit as well to make sure that you're all on the same, on the same level of understanding, on the same page. So we said before, you can produce hydrogen with electrolyzation of water, and then you use that hydrogen to store it into a tank, and then you use it for energy production. So how do we use hydrogen for energy production? Because hydrogen in itself is just a gas. Yeah, it doesn't have energy. You have to do something with it to produce energy. Do you know how to do that? How you can use hydrogen to produce energy or to make useful energy?
Well, to produce pure hydrogen, you need to release energy. For example, for the electrolyzation of water, you give energy and you split the two molecules. So in this way, when the process goes back, it produces energy or heat.
Okay, so there is one way to do that. If you were to match, so for example, if you, let me say, there are two ways here. Okay, let me spread the beans already. So the two ways are, one is burn it like a fuel. So you put it in a combustion chamber and you burn it in an engine, like, imagine similar to what you would do with an internal combustion engine, and similar to what you would do in a gas boiler. You need a modified, of course, system, but a system that will allow you to use, instead of petrol, hydrogen, and instead of natural gas in your boiler at home, to use hydrogen. So that would be a way to do it. So direct burn. Burning, combustion, is a chemical process where you connect something with oxygen. So that is the combustion. Joining something with oxygen, that is called combustion. So if you do that, then hydrogen, again, as your colleague said, will be joined up with oxygen, will produce some version of water, either gas water or steam, or liquid water or whatever. And it will also produce a lot of heat, which can be used as direct energy for various needs. That's one way. Is it a good way? I'd say I'm extremely skeptical of whether that's a good way to do it. Why am I extremely skeptical? There are two reasons. One is hydrogen is not a joke of a fuel. It's extremely explosive. So thinking that you're going to be burning hydrogen on an open fuel, on an open flame with oxygen, I'm getting very scared in the idea. I wouldn't want to be anywhere near that, because controlling that flame and making sure it's not becoming explosive at any point, I'm not so sure that I want to have this in my house. I don't think I want to have that boiler at my house. I don't think I want to have that car running with that system. I think it's a highly dangerous activity to do. So that's one reason. The other reason is that whenever you have these combustions, you assume that you're burning only oxygen, but it's not that simple, I'm afraid. So whenever you have oxygen there, oxygen is being supplied in these processes by what? How do you find oxygen to run any combustion process? It's from the atmospheric air.
Yeah,
it's
molecular
exactly.
oxygen.
It's from the air you breathe, yeah? All of that air has oxygen in. So that's how we run, the combustion of natural gas on our gas boiler at home. That's how we run the combustion of petrol and diesel in our car's engine. There is air coming in. It's atmospheric air, normal air, that comes into the engine or into the open flame on your gas boiler and does this burning process. Right, okay. So what else do we have in our atmospheric air? What is our atmosphere consist? What does it consist of? Do you know?
Nitrogen,
so you have oxygen.
Nitrogen. Well, NO3, NO2.
No, wait. Don't go to pollutants. Tell me what is the atmospheric air made of?
Oxygen
CO2,
and nitrogen.
molecular oxygen.
I've heard two voices there. Oxygen and what else?
Well, CO2, but low percentage.
Okay, what else?
Nitrogen.
Correct. So you have nitrogen, carbon dioxide, and and oxygen. Yeah. So to be specific, you have oxygen. I mean, again, the specifics depend on where you are in the world, but let's say roughly something like 21% of oxygen, something like that. And you have nitrogen, approximately, really the rest of it is nitrogen. So you have something like 79% nitrogen. And you might be wondering, right, okay, and where does carbon dioxide go? And the truth is carbon dioxide is something like 0.04, something like that. Yeah. So there is a little bit of carbon dioxide there, but it's so minuscule that it doesn't even play a role there. Now, that might be quite a surprise for some of you, but I will use it to make you reflect on something else. Yes. So you often say when you're in your room, right, and you have all the windows closed and there's no ventilation, often you say, right, why don't you open the window to get some oxygen in, to get some fresh air in? Do you say that sometimes? Do you feel you need to ventilate because there's not enough oxygen in the room?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you see, this is all wrong. There's always enough oxygen in the room. It's very unlikely that you have managed to breathe all the oxygen. What you normally do when you breathe is that you take in all of this air, of course. Nitrogen comes in and out, doesn't do anything. It doesn't react very much inside your body. Oxygen reacts a little bit and produces and becomes carbon dioxide. Yeah. So that's the process that happens. So you could be thinking that, oh my God, I have already consumed all the oxygen in the room after, I don't know, if you do this for 2 days, if you stay at home to study for your coursework, for example, you might be thinking that this has happened, but it's almost impossible to breathe all the oxygen and produce so much carbon dioxide. It takes a lot. However, what is happening is that you will burn a little bit of oxygen, maybe 1%, let's say. So oxygen will go from 21% to 20% in your room. But what will happen, and that happens quite easily, is for your carbon dioxide to become something like, let's say, something like 0.01%. 0.1%. Something like that. So if your carbon dioxide becomes something like that, that's the problem. It's not lack of oxygen, it's that you have very high concentration of carbon dioxide. That is what becomes difficult. So our bodies do not cope very well with high concentration of carbon dioxide. So if I were to convert these units to what we call parts per million, so the normal outside, in the clean air outside, concentration of carbon dioxide, if we go for ppms, yeah, parts per million, do you know how much it is, roughly?
400.
Yeah, it's about 400. Actually, right now, it seems to be something like 416 ppm. That's the world average. Yeah, 116 ppm. Do you know how much it was 150 years ago before the Industrial Revolution?
$200?
Yeah, it was around 250, 260. Yes, so pre-industrial, and there are many definitions of what pre-industrial means, at what kind of date specifically, but you would be looking for something like, say, 260 ppms. Some people would say 275, it depends, but it's thereabouts. So what we've managed to do in these years of burning coal, burning fossil fuels massively like we're crazy, we've managed to grow carbon dioxide from 260 to roughly 416 ppms. And we keep climbing, of course. Yeah? So we expect this to rise quite significantly in the next years, simply because of the fossil fuels we've burned already. And because, of course, we will carry on burning for a few more years, we'll keep increasing that. So it's not a joke of a difference here. It's quite a significant difference what you see here. Now, if I check a little bit, I have an air quality monitor in my room here. Yeah. Let me see a little bit. What is the carbon dioxide I have in my room? I don't think you can see it. I don't know. Can you see it? Can you see my phone? Is it possible to see? Does this camera focus on this thing? Oh, it does. Look at that.
Almost.
Just if you put it really close.
Yeah, can you see it now?
Yes, like this,
Now,
yes.
yeah.
So carbon dioxide, 802 ppm. Yeah. Is it visible or is it the
Yes.
other? Yeah, is it visible? Okay.
Yes.
So carbon dioxide, 802 ppm in my room right now. You'd be surprised to know my window is open. But because I talk all the time, I emit much more carbon dioxide. So even though my window is open, that's not providing enough ventilation to combat that. So still, despite an open window, I have 800 ppm. If I were to close that window and do a class like this for 3 hours without any ventilation, it would probably go to around 2000 ppm. Now, 2000 ppm is a lot more than what it is outside and what we're used to. What does that do to us? Let's think a little bit here. Anything above 1500 starts having noticeable cognitive impacts. So anything above 1500 ppm, you could be running an experiment in that room, and you could be giving people, specific IQ kind of tests to run, and those same people, if they would score lower already. There would be noticeable impacts in their ability to think complicated concepts. So anything above 1500, it starts being bad for your ability to think clearly. It's not immediately detrimental, so it doesn't destroy your ability, but it starts having an impact. It's an impact which is not very trivial. It's noticeable on a research basis. Yeah, you can monitor it. Anything above 1500. Now, if you're driving a car with 3 or 4 people in, and you have the ventilation closed, it can easily climb up within the course of like half an hour, yeah, quite fast. It can easily climb up to something like 3,500, 4,000 ppm. Now, that's a time when you're driving a car. So it's quite dangerous. You need to have your brain together. But it's yet extremely dangerous at that point. So that's what ppms do there. So if you have something like 4,000 ppm, you're not thinking straight anymore. A lot of your cognitive functions are not working very well at that point. So in non-ventilated areas, non-ventilated crowded areas, it's very easy to see these ppms going very high, and at those levels it becomes extremely dangerous. Your capacity to think clearly is diminished. So that's a little bit of carbon dioxide issues. I say this just as a side gig because it's something which I work on quite a lot in my own research for the last couple of years, because I'm quite interested, and I thought it's good for you to hear that. So it's not the oxygen diminishing in your room. You have plenty of oxygen, don't worry about that. It's that the carbon dioxide is increasing, and it increases at dangerous levels in a non-ventilated room, in a non-ventilated / crowded room. So that's that. I'm going to leave this now behind and take us back to where we were earlier, which was our discussion about hydrogen. I thought it's good for you to know these things because it's, I'd say, one of the most important things, as you move on and you forget about the energy things and you think of real world things and ventilation and COVID and things like that. COVID comes to this as well because carbon dioxide concentration is used as a proxy to understand if our room is well ventilated. So we use carbon dioxide metrics to understand if our room is well ventilated enough to be able to disperse any COVID particles as well, any coronavirus particles. So that's a side gig for me, something I do on my free time. Hydrogen, though, let's go back to this after this big, parenthesis, which I thought I'd tell you more about. We have things like, for example, you go in and you start thinking of how to produce your hydrogen. Now, there are many ways, like I said before, green, blue, gray, but once you have it produced, you enter that area of usage. That's where we were, if you remember. And we were talking about the possibility of burning hydrogen directly, or a normal flame, or a combustion engine, or whatever. And I was telling you that's not a great idea, because it's very explosive, And B, there's a second reason for that. That second reason is that as you're using atmospheric air to get oxygen into your process, into your combustion process, what we said before was that you have something like 79% in there of nitrogen in that process. So you drive nitrogen into a very hot flame together with your oxygen. They both go together. It's just that only oxygen interacts with hydrogen. But hang on a minute. What does nitrogen do there? If you bring nitrogen to a very high temperature, and it is, as it is in atmospheric air, very close to oxygen, what it does, it produces lots of nitrogen dioxide and lots of nitrogen oxide. Yeah, produces these two guys, nitrogen dioxide and nitrogen oxide. And that's not good. You don't want those. So that's what we normally call in atmospheric chemistry, we call them NOx. Yeah, so it's these guys. So it's NO alone, nitrogen oxide, nitrogen dioxide, and nitrogen trioxide even. All of these exist. And there are also other versions of these. I'm not going to be bother you with the other variations. These not only have a climate change impact, but that's not the main thing that they do, but they cause significant respiratory problems if you're breathing them. So burning hydrogen directly keeps emitting very significant amount of nitrogen oxides, which are a very bad air pollutant. It's a very toxic air pollutant. You have the same production of air pollution produced when you burn direct natural gas. Yeah, you produce carbon dioxide because every fossil fuel does that, but you also produce lots of nitrogen oxides, which are very dangerous. I mean, in high concentrations, this is lethal, it's not a joke. In lower concentration, it can cause you asthma, it can cause you lung problems, and all sorts of, mild poisoning experiences. So it's not a pollutant you want. So if we want to be talking about building a clean environment, burning hydrogen as a fuel is stupid. Yeah, there's nothing good about it as an idea. Even if we produce that hydrogen with renewable energy sources. Now, there's another way to do it. So forget the open fuel, the open flames. Let's go to fuel cells. Yes, so fuel cells like this. Fuel cell. So you can use hydrogen in fuel cells, and this is a chemical process where you introduce hydrogen in a fuel cell, and chemically the fuel cell produces electricity. So that's the idea. It's kind of a reverse battery in a way. You add hydrogen in there, and that produces electricity at the poles of the system. It's lovely. It's a static system. It's not an engine with moving parts. It can keep being productive for as long as you keep feeding it with hydrogen. So in that way, it's kind of a nice system. It's not hugely fast, and it's not hugely small. So it's not particularly compact. Toyota has done enormous amounts of work to make it compact enough to make it run, in a car, for example. But it still has its own limitations. It's not particularly easy system to run. It doesn't produce any very detrimental pollutants. It just produces water, really. So as a byproduct of this, you will have electricity plus water. Its main disadvantage is that it cannot produce energy very fast, which is what I was saying earlier, that hydrogen cars typically run the motors through a battery. Yeah, you don't connect the fuel cell to the motor because the fuel cell doesn't produce such a rapid injection of energy to allow the car to accelerate fast or do whatever. What you do instead is you keep charging that battery non-stop through the fuel cell, and you use the energy from the battery to run the car up and down, because you don't really need to accelerate all the time with a car. Yeah, that's quite clear. So that's what fuel cells do. It's a different way to run the system, but of course it increases the complexity of any energy flow system. So does that make sense so far? Because I've bombarded you with everything and I don't even have slides on these things. So how do you feel about the things you've heard so far? Any questions on hydrogen? Any questions on, I don't know, on anything else you've heard today?
Sorry, maybe could you repeat like the fuel cell, how it works?
Yeah, sure. It's a chemical process. It's an electrochemical process in reality. in which you and again, I'm treating it as a black box. I don't want to go into the insides of it. You put hydrogen, introduce hydrogen to the fuel cell, and there's an electrochemical process happening where fuel cells from that hydrogen produce electricity, and they release water as well. Because essentially they allow atmospheric air to join the hydrogen, and that joins hydrogen with oxygen in reality. So you have production of water from one side and electricity from the other. Does that make sense? It's a very black box description of what I'm doing here, but I'm keeping it simple.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, okay. So that's your very basic fuel cell. Will we see a lot more of electric cars running with fuel cells? I doubt it a lot. I don't think so. I think batteries have evolved so rapidly, and they are already into the market way more established in hydrogen cars. I think that's over. Will we see them maybe, I don't know, in bigger vehicles, in trucks or things like that? Maybe. I kind of doubt it again, but maybe there is hope there. We'll see them in airplanes. I'd say very likely. In large aircrafts, very likely we'll see hydrogen there. Will we see hydrogen also in large-scale energy storage, like grid-level storage for several days or weeks? I think so. I think we will see it there as well. I think that has a significant potential there. There are various ways in which you might be able to identify uses of hydrogen and all of that, but I'd say I want you to be careful with whenever you're hearing about hydrogen and trying to understand where it is that hydrogen is a better option than not. Let me show you another link I have here, and it is here. And it's again the same guy. I'm sorry for quoting on everything. Maybe I can do with the image directly. The same, it's again Michael Liebreich. But I think it is worthwhile because he has done really all of this very interesting work. So copy image, and let me see, can I post the image here for you? No, it doesn't work. I cannot copy the image. But if you can, did you click on the link? Did you click on the link? Can you see the link?
Yes.
Just posted, yeah? Okay, so if we just see it together very, very fast, if you see the first level of stuff you see there, so it's essentially a kind of a taxonomy into which you can see where hydrogen is usable and where it is totally nonsensical. So the unavoidable is the uses of hydrogen which are good. Going down is where hydrogen is not really going to make it. So going up, it's what I told you before about fertilizers, hydrogenation of certain fuel or of certain foods. Thank you, Rafael, for posting the picture here directly. You will see it on things like hydrocracking, desulfurization. So these are all chemical processes, yeah? Then you will see it as well, possibly, in various applications in long-distance shipping, in off-road vehicles, where again you need a lot of energy storage. In steel production, we already have steel production happening right now. It's not something which is crazy. Chemical feedstock, we do have that as well. Basically, the green ones are pretty much things that are happening already. Yeah. So long-term storage, again, I think that's the next thing we're going to be seeing hydrogen working on. Long-haul aviation is where the next thing is going to be. Coastal and river vessels and so on. Yeah. So you don't want me to be reading each line of this. But when you see, things towards the end, like the G level, so metro trains and buses, hydrogen fuel cell cars, urban delivery, 2- and 3-wheelers, bulk e-fuels. You hear companies like Porsche developing e-fuels. That's stupendous ideas. Power system balancing, forget it. I mean, hydrogen there is already redundant. There is very little chance that these activities will ever run on hydrogen. The reason is they already run much better on batteries already with today's batteries. So you don't even need to make better batteries to totally disqualify hydrogen from these activities. At level F, you will be probably seeing some discussions about domestic heating with hydrogen. Forget it. I mean, that's, again, like I told you before, these are bad ideas. They will never grow enough to be mainstream. Some companies will try to promote them simply because they're natural gas companies. Yes, so they want hydrogen to remain into the market, but in reality, there's no good reason to run hydrogen in these systems. So that's my little, very little but still very fast input on hydrogen and what is it good for and what it isn't good for. I think it's important for you to have a feel of what these things are, particularly because you will be hearing a lot of noise regarding hydrogen, and that is very much fossil fuel companies' noise. So these guys have a lot of capacity to make noise. They control, media relationships. They control politicians. They control lots of significant decision-making centers. So I want you to be very cautious with what you listen about hydrogen, because a lot of it is just, just trying to promote fossil fuels. It's not about clean energy. So make sure whatever you do with hydrogen is about clean energy and not about maintaining the status quo of pollution. So I'm quite keen to leave you on that note, but I want to make sure that if you have any questions, we can cover them into the next few minutes that we have left. So any questions from whatever we've talked about so far?
Hey, Professor, could you please repeat when you said that we should focus on hydrogen, but the clean one? Yes.
So if you, I can see Rafael has posted the picture. Do you see that from the chat?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the first line of users are all chemical stuff. Yeah, chemical users. They're not energy users, and they're already happening. The second line, I'm looking at B. That has some energy users. Yeah, it has shipping. It's basically using it to run, large ship tankers. That's on. Off-road vehicles, again, I would say straightforward, but again, it's not like you need a lot of those. Steel and chemical feedstock, that's both, chemical manufacturing stuff. Yeah. So again, that's not energy. Long-term storage, that's energy. So I would say this line is the first energy stuff you would expect hydrogen to move to. Long-term energy storage, like seasonal storage, that's what we were talking about before, and shipping. These two, I would say, are the major areas you will see hydrogen going to. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Anybody else? Anything else we need to address?
Maybe just a few words on the energy crisis you mentioned, I think a couple of weeks ago. It seems like some things have changed, right? Do you have any new update on that?
Correct. So there are a couple of things that have changed. One is, and most important, is that the panic is a little bit over. I don't think we should be less panicked, to be honest, but I'm a very conservative person when it comes to risky behaviors with energy supply. But that's why I say that. So if you see in the energy markets, the electricity markets in particular, and the gas markets, price has been coming down to, I wouldn't say very low levels, but much more normal levels. So it's not where we were, say a couple of years ago, but it is not where it was a month ago, where things were totally insane with energy prices. What has changed in reality is that President Putin has been quite clear that he intends to find solutions to the energy crisis and to supply Europe with much more gas than currently is the case. Now, that sounds good, and that has given some respite in the markets, but Russia seems to be connecting such promises for more gas to the Nord Stream gas pipelines, essentially pipelines which connect Russia to Germany directly. So not through Ukraine or not through Belarus or other countries. Yes, so it's a direct connection, Russia to Europe, to EU countries rather than previous connections that we had through Ukraine or Belarus. So Russia wants to see that Nord Stream pipeline being put in use immediately. This is really I would say this is really in a way, the blackmail, one would say. The German government is being a little bit slow with approving the pipeline. I need to say the pipeline is there, yeah, is already produced, manufactured, and it's installed, and everything is ready with it. It's about legal arrangements of having the pipeline operational, which could be approved quite soon, but Russia wants to put pressure in having that done. So basically what they say is, we will be able to give you more gas, but we want to run it through Nord Stream pipeline. We don't want to run it through Ukraine. And there are good reasons for that, including environmental reasons, because Ukraine has lots of gas losses. But in my opinion, in addition to these reasons, I think Russia is using this as a leverage point to accelerate the licensing of Nord Stream pipeline. So that is what has changed. Are we ready to say that the Nord Stream pipeline will be approved tomorrow morning? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think Germany is such a fast country in these things. I don't think it's the most flexible country. It's a little bit more thorough with that stuff. And let's not forget, Germany has just had elections, and a new government will be formed into the next weeks. But it can easily take, several more weeks until there's a new government up and running that can take decisions and accelerate, decision making into that front. In the meanwhile, let's be clear, where winter is coming, lower temperatures are coming, demand for natural gas will be skyrocketing. So should we be very comfortable and very complacent? I'm not so sure. I wouldn't be that confident about it. Already, let's face it, significant industries around Europe, industries that were relying on natural gas, particularly fertilizers, particularly certain chemical feedstock industries. So industries that were relying on natural gas, not just for energy, but also for their chemical processes, are either completely shut down or they're partially shut down already, without hitting again another peak in prices. So yeah, I'm not particularly comfortable with that. I don't think it will reach me and you as consumers. I mean, most of us at least, it won't reach us. I mean, not to the extent that you see in the market, yeah. But the reason for that is that lots of the supply has been hedged already with future contract purchases from last year. So I don't think you're gonna see, a 500% rise in your energy bills anytime soon. But you will definitely see a 30-40% rise. So that's my take on the crisis and where we're at the moment. Does that cover you?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Because before I wave goodbye. No? Okay. So it was a real pleasure teaching this class. I had a very good time. It's always a shame that we're not from close, but I think even though we've managed to make it work, and we've managed to make hopefully a good experience for all of you, and a good learning experience for all of you. We will be in touch, because I know a lot of you will be working on your coursework for the next few weeks. So I will be waiting, to hear from you, and of course to get your reports on the 10th of December. So keep up with that. Make sure you do your best. Make sure you remain curious about all things energy. I think they matter for energy, but I think they also matter for our environment overall, and I think they matter for our economy overall. So they're very important topics. So stay tuned for all of these things. I think you will be hearing a lot more. I think these things won't go away. So that's all from me. Thank you for attending this module, and good luck with everything. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Very much.
Bye.